As Chad had indicated earlier, this is actually a continuation of an event that we had, I think, a couple months ago with actually a couple of participants that met the bar and we invited back, no, just kidding, that participated last time as well, Maria and Neil. So we should go ahead and introduce ourselves. The topic, again, is slightly different than the initial conversation, but this is around scaling. The last conversation we had a couple months ago was around business development generally, and I think there was a discussion or a request to really focus on scaling the business development function within your company. So let's go ahead and just introduce ourselves, Maria.
Testing? Great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for sticking around and for your patience. I'm Maria Karaivanova. I'm currently head of business development and partnerships at Cloudflare. At Cloudflare, we are on a mission to build a better internet, and we provide performance and security services to anyone with a website. Prior to joining Cloudflare 3 years ago, I was a venture capitalist at Tinto Capital. And prior to that, I've done various roles, including business development at very large organizations and some small organizations. So it's great to be back. Thank you. Thanks.
Great. Great.
Hi, Michael Fisher. I manage international business development with a particular focus on mobile and platform work at Twitter. Before that, I spent some time at Shazam managing, was VP of Business Development at Shazam. Before that, a number of years at Google, and also was an early guy at Virgin Mobile, started the business back in 2001.
My name is Neil Wall. I lead business development at Box. Been there a couple of years. Before that, I built and ran BD for Symantec and did a few different things, small company and some large companies before that. So,
David Pollock, I head up U.S. partnerships at Xero. We're an online accounting software. About 8 years. Can you hear me? We're about 8 years old. About 370,000 small business customers globally, and partnerships at Xero are everything from our large financial institutions to our 300 add-on partners that do really vertical online and business applications. So before Xero, I was moved around a bit, but spent some time at Amex doing business development there. Then before that, marketing and analytics at Citi. So financial services, and then some form of BD for about 10 years before that as well.
So we are going to try to cover a couple of topics, and then within each topic, maybe we'll pause for a few questions, okay? So this will be interactive. We had started a conversation on email around topics to cover, and then David had the wise question of, well, why don't we define business development? So let's go at it. David, do you want to take a stab at that?
I don't think I've ever heard business development defined the same way twice. So I feel like if we're going to talk about this, we should all kind of understand our points of view.
Put your mic up a little bit closer.
Yeah, sorry. I've never heard business development defined the same way twice. So I define it as the business development function is finding new value for the company in ways that you traditionally would not extract value, and it's doing it through partnerships.
I've also seen it defined in many different ways. At Box, it's quite simple. Net new revenue streams for scale. So companies like AT&T selling Box to their business customers, or building a platform of other companies that can actually accelerate your ecosystem. So some companies maybe in this room are actually using Box as the back end to power their mobile or their future SaaS applications that have a content need. And so BD is the engine that actually negotiates and promotes the use of Box in other applications. We do a few other things, but that's a good definition.
Yeah, I agree. It's difficult to define. I think it's super dependent on the company and the circumstances. I guess the way I've always thought about it is that it's business development drives the KPIs of the business, but it's not revenue, so it's not sales. It's anything else that the company does. It's not sales. It basically works with partners and third parties to drive the KPIs of the business. That's my whack at it.
At Cloudflare, I categorize it in 3 different categories. The first one is strategic partnerships. So those are large strategic partners, sumos or Goliaths or however you want to categorize them, that actually move the needle. And that includes international expansion as well. The second category is channel and distribution, and that includes reseller programs, referral programs, and so forth. And the third category are deep technology integrations. We have a very technical product, so integrations at the platform level, at variety of layers of the internet infrastructure that makes sense for our company.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's helpful to kind of set the context. So Michael, Twitter's public. It is a great service. I love it. I've loved it ever since it came out. Take us back to the very, very beginning, maybe, from your perspective. How did you guys, what are the basics for scaling the business development function that you guys kind of embraced? Is there anything you can say about that?
No. I think the biggest challenge of Twitter has been to put sort of a measurement against business development. I think that early on, growth was so fast and activity was so strong, and basically whatever we built for a US market just kind of took off around the world, that there was really no need to kind of think deeply about how to measure ourselves. And I think the key to our kind of growing the business development function, the first thing was really about figuring out how to measure ourselves. It's not always easy and it's not always crisp, but we try our best. If we have to estimate, we estimate. But at the end of the day, at the end of every quarter, we have to make sure that we're being held to something, even if it's forecasting activity 1 or 2 quarters down the road, which oftentimes business development is sort of focused on. So I would say the first thing is really measurement. I think the second thing is Twitter has evolved a significant amount in terms of how we approach the market and how we develop product around the world. And business development has had to evolve with it. So there's been a very kind of steady, introspective view on what what business development is doing for the company. I think one of the successes we've had is kind of migrated the function from just deal making to deal making plus partner management, to deal making plus partner management plus some sort of like technical account management, etc. The company has grown, there's been turnover, which is quite public, and the business development function has had to be flexible, but all the while kind of recognizing the value that it's creating for the company and being comfortable with that changing over time. So as it stands today, we're actually we serve a quite technical function, right? There's the product managers that work on Android every day and that are thinking very deeply about how to localize the experience for Japan or Korea or anywhere in the world. They really don't want to think about the details of a partner integration. And so that's forced our team to get quite technical and to bring on technical resources that in many companies would just be product managers or even engineers, but we adopt them and bring them into business development. So taking a close look at our own needs and how business development fills them, I think has been another critical element to how we scale. So I'd say being able to measure our contribution and also being flexible about what the value that we bring to the company over time.
How about that? Other thoughts around basics for scaling the business development function? Anyone? Yeah. Maria?
Go ahead. So up until recently, the business development function was very much one person at Cloudflare, which is quite typical at earlier stage companies. So the way I viewed it is, okay, great, I have very limited human resources. However, there's so many people on the team anyone from support to the developer team to sales, who can actually serve as business development resources through their networks and connections. So that was kind of early days, and piece of advice for those of you starting your own companies or in early stage companies, literally treat everyone as an extension of your business development organization, because people do talk to each other, people go to events, and if you teach them right on what the needs are and what the strategic focus is, they will actually be part of your business development organization. Having said that, now from a team perspective, and I think Michael covered nicely all the different terms and metrics around measuring the success of the business development function, but from a team standpoint, Today, we have 2 senior business development people who are going after those strategic partnerships and large deals. Then we have an account management function that works and manages large accounts, checks in regularly with them, works also very closely with our marketing and PR organization. On top of that, there is product, because we are also very technical. And I have a technical trainer on the team because it is very important when you have technical solution that those partners understand how to sell it and position it to their customers and are excited. So it really depends on what works best for your company when you're building the team around business development.
Yeah, DJ.
Yeah, I guess a couple of thoughts that might sound odd, but scaling BD, I think I've experienced it in 2 ways. One, I ran BD at Symantec. We bought Veritas. I inherited a BD team. When I was running Symantec, it was maybe 8 or 9 people for about $3 billion in revenue. And then I inherited this other team, which is another $3 billion in revenue, and it was an additional 75 people. And it was like, what do I do with all of these people? And so we downsized to what I thought was right, was about 22 people net. And that was hard, but, and what was interesting is metrics are important, and at Box has had explosive growth as a company since I joined, but the BD team has actually been flat. And that's with intent, because I'm more interested in being able to execute on the things the BD team are doing in engineering or in product or in sales than getting more people in BD. And so that's a constant balance that I would ask everybody to think about is, BD is an important function, and you need to make sure that you have a really focused team that are aligned to this strategy, but make sure that the work to be done is actually being executed on. My colleague who runs engineering at Box, we kid around and he says, I need 3 engineers for every BD person to support the things that you guys bring in. And that's actually not precise, but it's a useful way to think about it. It's not scaling the BD team, it's scaling the functions to support the things you as a company want to go do.
I hate to get too tactical, but it depends really for me on the life stage of the business. So at Zero, we're a relatively young company in the US, and it's a question of deal flow and capacity. And if the business is prioritizing deals that are falling away because there's just not enough capacity to manage them, you need to expand BD. As a business matures, so Amex was the most mature BD organization I've ever been a part of. We'd actually split the organization in terms of verticals and vertical focus. Again, when we were defining BD, I heard everything from channel sales to product. And in my mind, that product piece is probably the most essential bit of BD. Your BD people need to really understand the product, and they can only understand specific parts of a product so well when the product gets to grow in that way. So in particular at Amex, we were looking at, one side of the team was focusing on marketing tools and those types of partnerships, and the other one was focused on cash flow. So very different types of product. And again, so then maturity of the business and the business needs.
That's great. So where you touched on the team again, and a bunch of us have, but what's the planning behind that? Who are your first hires, and what's kind of the goal in terms of the strategy of growing that team and so forth? What's been your thinking on that?
Our thinking at Cloudflare initially was, let's hold off on scaling a sales team and focus first on scaling a kind of a business development function, a partnerships function, before we start hiring the sales team. And I think Mark on the earlier panel differentiated the different stages of building a sales team really nicely. So for the longest time, we did not have an enterprise sales team, but that's partly driven by the nature of our business, which was in the early days all self-serve. So it was a lot more important that we have the right support team to support those customers, and that we have the right partners. So my thoughts are, if you are selling a highly technical solution, and if there's a lot of partnerships and channel opportunities, don't rush hiring that first salesperson, and especially not a VP of sales. And if you do hire a salesperson, hire that general athlete who is scrappy and technical and excited about your product and your customer and is not as commission driven as a typical salesperson.
How about others on that hiring plan and team? Michael?
At the beginning, we started with sort of generalists, kind of athletes who could be part-time salespeople, part-time product people, part-time deal makers, part-time product managers. And we found those people who could also, by the way, interface with pretty senior C-level folks in each market. We've placed that person, and then we've built teams around them. So over time, you start to have people that start to specialize, like a deal maker or a partner manager or somebody who's more sort of a technical troubleshooter. But the key hire for us has always been, you got to get that right first leader, at least from a regional perspective, in each market or each part of the world, who you can feel confident can pretty much do everything and then grow a team around and be a real leader at the company. We've been, Twitter, I think everybody would admit, has been a little bit too US focused, at least in the deep past. And putting business development people in other regions of the world that were real leaders and understood the market real well to proselytize back at headquarters, super important. So I guess I would say for us in each market, it's been about finding that leader, finding that like athlete, and then finding somebody you have the confidence to build around, and then doing just that, building a team around that person.
I do agree with what's been said. I guess the only other thing to add is it's really hard to get an experienced BD leader that will fit a startup culture and thrive. I've seen people who are really awesome on paper, they come from very successful backgrounds, and then they hit the reality of a startup and it's like, holy crap. And so my experience has been people who are generalists, who have some product, who are presentable and wicked smart and just entrepreneurs. People, like the founders that many of you guys are, if you can get clones that will be the future CEOs, that's who you want, even if they don't have much experience. I would index heavily towards that type of person, rather than somebody who, did this amazing thing running a program at VMware or SAP or Oracle. They don't necessarily translate or transfer that well.
What's the surprise, Neil? Is it the chaos, just the lack of control? I mean, what are the things that really kind of stun people?
I think it's the lack of resources is probably one of the biggest things. Is like you want to go do, we have this tension all the time, whereas we want to go do these amazing things. There's an unbelievable depth of opportunity, but you're always going on instinct and gut on what's the right thing to do right now. And that changes very quickly, and you might go fast on something and then something else comes along that's better. You're not going to burn the resources, and it's constant. And I would say that speed is something that is hard to, you have to, but again, many people in this room understand what I'm talking about, but that's not something that always transfers from bigger companies, even though those guys have got the deal-making expertise and maybe the technical expertise, but they don't necessarily have the DNA.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's just a little controversial. I would say don't hire BD. Just don't do it. Wait until you absolutely have to. But like I think it's kind of been said, especially at early stage, BD is going to be a distraction. You have watching Sean in the slides and being that tactical about getting to a place where you've got product market fit. I didn't see BD as adding value in many of those places. So again, knowing that we're talking to an audience of entrepreneurs and early startups, right? So wait. Then there's a kind of a find the hunters. There's that BD hunter mode, and there's the BD farming mode. So the hunters are going to go out there and kind of find the new thing and help close it and bring it in. They can only do so many of those before you actually need to put someone in there who knows how to kind of continue to extract value from those deals. So don't do it, then get a hunter, and then get a farmer. And if you can get a hunter and the farmer work really well together, you can build a lot of value.
Yeah, maybe in certain businesses, and I appreciate being controversial, I love that. I am Irish. It depends on the business, right? If you're building I mean, I worked at Oracle, and Larry Ellison built a business out of a shitty database, but he did deals with all of the operating systems and hardware companies, and there's a perception that it was homogeneous across every platform, and enterprises said, that's what I need, even though he hadn't actually done it. And so there is a time and a place, it depends on what you want to do. One could argue that Aaron Libby, founder of Box, has the ability to bring together a lot of different companies to go do things, and it creates momentum, which is important as a startup. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish.
I appreciate it. I'd say how many Larry Ellisons are there? How many Aaron Libby's are there? I haven't met a lot.
There's 50 of them in this room.
Sounds good. Okay, questions on team and scaling basics? Anyone? Wow, okay. Okay, sure. Yeah.
So this question is for David. What if the company's focus of getting the first customers is from channel? Is that a bad thing?
So is that finding the channel, or is that actually selling into the channel?
It's selling through the channel. So the founders come from a particular company, that company is very successful, and that company acts as the channel or a go-to-market, at least for the first 10 customers.
So I'll go back to what these guys were saying on the previous panel, which is
Yep.
the CEO has to be the first and best salesperson. This is what I've seen. And then I kind of, beyond that, about to what Maria said about how the first set of salespeople aren't necessarily commission-driven. They're not coin-operated, as Sean said it. They're folks who are thinking a little bit more scrappily about the product and how they're passionate about it and they're out there, and you evolve into that.
So the question is, do you still, in that situation, do you need a BD person, or wait?
If you know what your channels are, I don't think so. But that's just, again, an early day, I was being controversial. I'd say early days, it's about that focus. If you're already involved into a channel, psychology, and you know what those things are, and you need to expand them, then get creative. But
Go ahead.
One thing I was going to say about selling through channel, I depends on the product very much, but I do believe having a person, whether you call them partnerships person or channel person, or whatever you want to call them, who understands your product and your technology, but also can go and understand the channel partner's needs and pain points, is very important way to build that relationship and scale it. Because oftentimes what I've seen is you close a very exciting deal, you put that logo on your website or on your materials, and you make 1 or 2 sales, but getting to that 50% penetration through channel or scaling with a specific channel partners really requires relationship management and business development person. And in fact, the first hire I made on the business development team at Cloudflare was a product manager, very technical, to help me specifically work with the engineering team to build product for channel in particular. And again, depends on your solution.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask one thing. So you mentioned the idea of a farmer BD versus a hunter BD. What's that profile look like, and what are the differences to spot between those two if you're sort of screening people?
it's a great question, and it's one that I'm struggling with right now. So again, I look at where we are, and even though we're established around the world, I think in the US we're quite new. And we're still trying to prove that new channels can work. So at this point, we've got a few good new channels from hunting. We've gone out there. They're a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more creative in terms of meeting new people and finding the new opportunities. And then the farmer has got that same kind of, I'm happy to be out there meeting new people, but I'd rather work off of an established relationship. And now that I'm within these 4 walls and these confines, I can actually figure out the value and fine tune it. So what do they look like? It's a little bit harder to define. I'd say the person who really loves to work a room is your hunter, and the person who walk into a room where they know everybody and have conversations all night is your farmer.
Okay, great. Why don't we jump to the next topic quickly, which is business development as a career. So maybe could each of you say a little bit about what does that entail? I mean, what does it feel like to you? What's been the career path for you? What's been the lifestyle, et cetera? I mean, tell us a little bit about your week to week.
Maria?
You don't want to go first?
Sure.
I got into business development by chance. I remember I was managing. This was at Virgin. I was managing our data products, and it turns out we had to actually go get some content to populate, a vending machine that we were trying to create as a part of the service. And I was the only one in the building to do it. Everybody else was doing something else. And so I remember calling up the lawyer, and this woman named Lisa, and she was like, okay, well, if we're going to go work with EA, why don't you go put together a term sheet? And I was like, yeah, good idea. I was like, what the hell is it? What does a term sheet look like? And I just kind of started doing it, and it was a lot of fun. And the next job, and I went from Virgin, and I was in marketing the whole time. But then I just became business development, and I went to Google, and that was sort of it. I think since then it's just been it's really being out with the community. It's listening to people talk. And Maria mentioned something earlier. It's the real art is understanding what your partner's business is all about, and then trying to connect back at headquarters with what you're trying to do and find the overlap. And most of that is listening, less of that is talking, I found. And that's listening, whether it's whether it's in your office, or it's on a street, or it's in a place like this, or it's in Tokyo, or it's wherever, but it tends to be wherever the partner is. So another thing that I've loved about it is just that it's really it is really different, and it changes over time. So we've been talking about sometimes being a partner, a product manager, sometimes being a deal maker, sometimes being a farmer, sometimes being a hunter. It's really just kind of going with the flow and being flexible about the value that you're bringing to the business. That's been my experience.
So from my journey has been, started out more on the product side and then marketing, and I liked financial business modeling, so I did pricing, and somebody said, you'd be good at this. And so I kind of fell into it. It was not a career, and then I spent the last 10 years trying to get out of it. Not because I don't love it, but because after 7 years at a large company that makes Symantec, I decided to run a business that we bought and incubated something, and then I joined Box, and was like, well, you're great at business development, so can you do this? So now I'm actually taking on some business incubation in addition to that. So I actually enjoy it. It's challenging because there's more opportunity than there is time in the day to do things. So you're always thinking like a GM in my mind. So it's one of the, but I always tell people who are, especially younger people who are in my team, or anybody who wants any advice on this, it's like, it's not necessarily a career long term. It could be, and it can be, and it can be fulfilling. It's also a great stepping stone to senior leadership. You're doing senior deal making, understanding your way around a P&L, understanding a domain and technology, negotiating, evangelizing. These are all important skills that if you're an engineer, you may not get. If you're a salesperson, you may get, but in very limited scope. So it's a really awesome stepping stone if people want to go do other things beyond that.
So I'll echo what everybody just said again. It's a general management position, and you learn a lot, and you're doing everything. And this is where I'm going to separate myself from the panelists. I don't want to offend anybody. I do BD because I'm an entrepreneur who lacks the balls to go do something entirely on my own. So instead, I sit in somebody else's house and start businesses. So if you're already out there doing it, I don't know that it's a good fit for you, but that's my thinking on it.
That's brave. That's great. It's really, it's really true. As a business development person, you're part GM, you're part sales, you're part strategy. Oftentimes, you're corporate development. You do a lot. So my personal path I stumbled into business development for a startup. So I had the fortune of learning deal making at Boeing from one of the top Boeing salespeople. And I spent 5 years there where, the deal cycles, it takes 2 to 3 years to close a major deal. Most of them were international. I was, what was my title? Licensing manager as part of the intellectual property team or something like that. But I was learning from the best, and that made me really passionate about deal making and really understanding all parties and all stakeholders in a situation that allows you to close a deal. So I went from selling fighter jets into completely different line of business. So I did spend some time in venture capital and had a very interesting fork in the road, deciding, do I want to really pursue a career in VC, or do I want to go and get operating experience, which is a buzzword, especially in the Valley. So I decided that I really want to get operating experience, and at Cloudflare, my first day, I showed up and I said, what do you want me to do? I was early business hire, so I've done everything from customer service to sales to API integrations, and mind you, I'm not an engineer by background. So oftentimes people would come and ask me, how do I get a job, like a business development job at a startup? And to me, it's like, don't even say the word business development, just show up and do whatever helps them the most and know exactly what you're bringing to the table. But so my path was a little bit more long-winded, which is, we kind of build this partnerships function and channel, and now we've turned it into more of a business development discipline function. I'm not a career business development person. Who knows where I'm going to be next time, but it's a lot of fun and I'm learning a lot.
So what are the skills then that you think each of yourselves has that really is enabling you to do this so well? I mean, you're all great speakers, but what do you think is the talent that people should make sure that they have in order to do this job? And maybe is it the same thing that you're looking for in people that you're trying to hire as well?
I'd say being an incredible listener when you are identifying opportunities and are in externally facing meetings. Being able to bring people together inside your company to get things done. You've spent a lot of time talking about how many engineers it takes to support one business development person. It's very much true at most technology companies. Another thing is just being scrappy and versatile as an individual and understanding the bigger picture, being able to relate it both at the technical level, at the sales level, and just across the company is very important. That's helped me a lot.
Yeah, two really good ones. One, like Maria said, being a champion for the partner in your cause, which is a little bit cheerleader, a little bit quarterback, back at the home base. So really just kind of knowing your partner's business and making sure you can advocate for it with internally, huge important characteristic. And then the other one also, piggybacking on what Maria just said, is this idea of just empathy, being able to listen before you talk. I mean, the worst I think in business development is somebody who gets in and into a meeting and shows a big presentation and doesn't really listen to what the partner wants, because that's really what it's all about. You're not going to get a deal done unless you know what your partner wants and you can help them achieve it while getting what you want at the same time. So I would say those two things pretty much overlapping exactly with what Maria just said.
To just add, being a bulldozer is a good thing. So tough-skinned, you're always going to get no from somebody. Usually in BD, when you're doing big deals, you cut across the whole company on both sides. And that's, if you're selling something, you can either get yes or no from somebody who's buying. That's actually not that hard. If you're trying to structure a deal, if you're an engineer, you can build something, it'll work or it won't. And if you have more time, maybe you'll get there. If you're doing a deal that some people want to do and others don't in both organizations, and the decision making goes across every function in both companies, it's really hard to get a good deal done that actually works. So that's something that I look for as somebody who's just has grit and aggressive, smart, and is not going to take no for an answer. Sometimes you feel like you have to turn them off. It's like, yeah, well, I got it, but they're the type of people that are usually good.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said. I like grit. I actually did. Someone just hired someone as a BD manager, and she has no BD experience, no industry experience at all. She actually was doing fair trade coffee work in Ethiopia. But she walked in, and so again, Xero is online accounting for small business. So we're solving problems in the back office, trying to optimize workflows and data management. And I said, I looked at her resume and had a good conversation with her. I said, so why do you want this job? Why do you want to do business development? She said, well, I am really passionate about information management and I love small business. And in my mind, that's what we're solving for. It's a pretty unsexy problem, but she's passionate about this problem and she wants to understand it. So she can automatically walk out into the marketplace and talk to someone who has a tool she's never heard of, get the download on what that tool is, and all of a sudden connect the dots and see how it helps solve the problem that we're trying to solve. So in my mind, that's the core skill, is identifying the value that's out there and how we solve that problem and bringing it back to us.
So before we bring Sean back, I thought Sean's point about in the sales world of making sure that you get true dollars from the big customers was interesting. Does that apply in your world as well, the BD world? I mean, are you guys, when you're signing up big logos, how much value do you need to be getting in exchange, or is it important just to get a deal done? What do you think?
Nobody's going to say just get a deal done, right? Yeah.
Depending on the stage, right?
Well,
I would say actively avoid some of the big deals, right? They're big distractions. I like the smaller deals. You can actually, again, it comes back to value for me. Can you extract value from that deal? And more often than not, the big deals are just going to extract value from you. So you'll blow cycles, you'll blow years, all your funding, and there are no silver bullets. So, right? Product market fit. I didn't hear big partners on any of those slides that help you get to a 5 on any of those evaluation metrics. So
It depends on what you're solving for. There's times when you want to do a big deal for momentum that may or may not result in immediate revenue, but that gives you the option to have that negotiation down the road with another company that will. And there's times to be hard asked about what's in it for me. And it really depends. And there is, I could go on, we have this debate actively all the time. There's an argument to be said to you want to do both and you want to do it all the time because that's sucking oxygen out of the ecosystem of other companies that you're competing with, so long as you can sustain the resource burn that's required.
So I'll caveat. So I would say if a big deal is not going to make you do an unnatural act for what your business model is, then yes, right? That's a good thing to pursue. But if you have to change who you are to comply and actually get the value back, then that would be my caveat. So.
Good caveat. Okay. Michael?
I guess, the way I've looked at it always, if there's not a path to driving some sort of KPI that you care about, and it's really just, signing a deal and doing a press release, I don't know, it's probably not worth doing. I think people can generally see through a partnership that's empty and that's just kind of sitting on the shelf, like a contract that's just sitting on the shelf. If it's something that takes a while to pay off, I think that's okay. You just have to get your arms around how long it's going to take and what the eventual outcome or expected value of the thing will be. But yeah, I think people can see through the logo on the screen, pretty easily. And it typically is, if it's a logo that matters, then it's going to be a pain in the butt to get that deal done in the first place, and you're going to be wondering, why you did it if it's just sitting on the shelf.
I think everything was really well said. My philosophy is when we are going after big deals, I want to make sure that we're ready and that partner is going to have a great experience. If it is a sales logo, that's a whole different story. Then if it's a combination of a deal where business development helps the sales team, then we do everything possible to close the deal and partner very closely with our sales team. It really depends on the deal, but from a partnership standpoint, I tend to not go after logos because in the long run doesn't pay off. What pays off is a really well thought out and well structured partnership that moves the needle.
That's great thoughts. Can Sean and the others return, and then let's go ahead and open it up for questions for the whole group then. So questions, yes, in the back.
So I wanted to thank you guys for mentioning, I love your comment about saying how you're cut on both sides, because I think that's the part that being especially being in a startup doing BD, you're always cut. And I think startups tend to, even to the founders sometimes will forget that, you're trying to push the pendulum for your organization to kind of go further. But I have a question about, for all of your organizations, all of the companies that you work for and represent, how receptive are you to small startups like ourselves who want to try to foster these partnerships? Because I know you guys did say a lot about it, but how open do you guys have an infrastructure to really help if we're doing SaaS or if we deal with
So the question is, how receptive are you to the little companies out there, the startups?
I'll take this. Very receptive, because we expect you guys to grow and be meaningful. So if I can start working with you when you're just building your infrastructure or product, and if I can help you think through it with our solution in mind, that's really, really powerful as you grow your company. And the other thing is Cloudflare has a startup program as well, where we give a certain service similar to what AWS will do or Rackspace will do. So if that's of interest, happy to talk.
Questions? Yeah, right here.
Yeah, mine's directed at Sean and his group, I guess. So we're a subscription-based business, but our customers are consumers, not businesses. So my question is, your 5 points there, which of those survive as what counts factors for a consumer-directed subscription business, and what other factors would you add or take away?
It's a good question. Well, I have spent 0 time in consumer in my career. It's funny, Dreamforce is a SaaS conference, and I got this question at Dreamforce too. I guess the most important thing is, how important is this product to the consumer? So I would think, engagement. There's all of us are consumers of a lot of products, and you'll test out a lot of things. So number of times someone downloads a product or clicks on a link, it doesn't mean anything. People are curious. At what point does it become a product that they want to use on an ongoing basis to solve whatever consumer pain point they have? I think that and so that probably translates in a bunch of those areas. I guess the other thing is, it's not a business tool, you get money. So, how are you going to actually monetize? And sometimes people trick people into paying or find other revenue sources. So that also would carry over as well.
Yeah, I mean, our application at Intuitive is really interesting in that we do sell the product to businesses. It's basically a portal where they invite their happy customers in to go and do stuff for them. But 99% of our users do not work for the companies who pay our bills. They are free agents. So we have a whole side of our business that studies the consumer part of it. And so we have a whole bunch of metrics around that. And so we have metrics around, for example, frequency. So how often do they come to the site? How many challenges they do? How many challenges they do per session? How many sessions do they do per month? The value of those activities. So for example, a referral lead is worth a lot more than a retweet, right? So that's kind of like, you probably heard of RFM, recency, frequency, monetary value. So we have some similar concepts around that. There's also retention curves that you can do. So just as businesses have churn, so do consumers, right? So we use it's like a half-life concept, like a radioactive isotopes, how they decay in a logarithmic curve. So we look at that religiously, and we're constantly trying to improve those curves and get it high, figure out how to retain better and better and better. So that might be some of the metrics that you could look at there.
Yeah. This is a BD question. So Maria, you brought up the point about with working with logos that are large, wanting to have a great partnership experience. So say you're having those conversations and they're interested, but you're just, frankly, you feel like you're not able to actually execute on that great partner experience. So how would you kind of keep those conversations going and not drop the momentum? Is there like a MVP use case? Say you could pair your products together without a technical integration. Like how do you show the interest, but you want to do it right, but not show like you want to ignore them for a while and come back to the table later?
So I have actually two things that may help you on this question. So with our enterprise level services, for the longest time, we didn't feel ready and scaled enough to offer a service, let's say, to Fortune 50 companies. But we did have the incoming interest, both from partners and from enterprises. So we created something called Enterprise Advisory Board. Where we pretty much said, look, we're actively working on it, we're still evaluating the opportunity, join our board, give us your feedback. And that's how we stayed engaged. And it took us a very long time to actually launch a full-scale enterprise offering. So I'd say, number one, if you can find what's interesting to them, do they want to help you shape your solution, and then be very transparent with them, because oftentimes, you get that partner, they'll get, or customer, they'll get bad experience. It is very difficult to get them to refocus because they may have moved on with someone else. And the second thing around big logos was, what I want to say, around kind of thinking through when is the right time to engage with them, constantly like going to them, maybe doing trainings with them, or they do trainings for your team. Just find those touch points to keep the conversation going. Go to their events if they have events and conferences. Make sure you know who is who. Send them relevant blog posts, press releases, whatever you're doing. Just keep that communication going until you're ready, and once you're ready, go for it.
This is for everyone on the BE panel, because the answer will be different. What are your success metrics and why?
I can go. ARR, that's obvious. We have a notion of influenced ARR, which is not directly from a partner, but it's influenced by the fact that you did an integration. But we measure that based upon 7-day active of an integration. So GE buys Box and Salesforce. The reason why, one of them may be because it's integrated. We measure the 7-day active of those users for that integration over some baseline of a similar type of customer not using an integration, and you can see what the churn is over time. We spend a lot of time thinking about metrics. It is important.
Depends. Honestly, for Zero, the way that I look at it, we have buckets of partnership opportunity. We have large financial institutions we're trying to partner with. We have small companies who are building to our API. We have large outbound integrations that we do, folks like Square. I would say that it's for sure not the number of deals we sign. That's the worst metric.
It is. Agree with that.
It's gonna be case dependent. So for banks, it literally is the number of integrations we launch, not how many we bring on. And then again, down the road, those metrics will change and how many people are actually using those integrations. So I don't believe there are short-term BD goals. I think they are all long-term. So again, that's why it really depends.
Consumer business, where business development deals are really just focused on bringing new users to the top of the funnel, so getting them exposed to Twitter content, whether it's syndicated on ESPN or in a newspaper or on the front page of Yahoo, or somebody that actually comes into somehow drawing them into the Twitter owned and operated app, right? So it's about bringing new users into the funnel and then getting them signed in. We tend to think about churn and engagement over time is more of a product issue. Not that we're not all working closely together, but our real focus is bringing people to the top of the funnel.
Just something to add, we have different categories of partners. So let's say, for example, in the hosting provider category, I look at the overall ecosystem. There are about 45,000 hosting providers in the world, and we partner with 12% of them. We directly integrated into their control panels, so that's over 5,000 of those partners. So I look very closely at that, and then look at the size of those partners and measure my team against, like, what conversations are we having, what's going on with the partners that we consider strategic. And then, of course, from a channel and distribution standpoint, looking at new customers who signed up through channel, which reseller plan they attached to, why they did or didn't. Those are kind of more measurable things. But typically, if your business development function is strategy driven, that may not be the right measurement in the beginning, and you have to be very careful to not focus your team on driving things like that when they should be instead focusing on understanding an ecosystem and penetrating a market, and that takes a long time. So just know your business and figure out what's the right metrics for you.
Okay, one last question, yeah.
Related to that question, what would be the right compensation plan for a BD person, given those metrics?
A lot of money.
Define a lot.
I won't try again. I really think it depends on where that person came from and what's motivating them. I'll keep coming back to the best BD people in many circumstances are product people. So they're going to be really oriented around that product and consider them a product manager for all intents and purposes. So whatever the salary scale there.
Yeah, I'm more a fan of aligning to the executive comp plan, not sales comp plans, because typically BD is about moving the needle for value, all the things we talked about, but it's, if you're just getting an incremental return on that FTE, they should be in sales. If you're getting disproportionate kicker in valuation of the company strategically over time, they're more like contributing at the exec level, and you should have similar, not obviously the same amount of money as the CEO, but structurally the same way.
For junior business development people, Glassdoor would be a good resource to get a sense of per region what the average salary expectations are. There are also a number of blog posts on the topic and Quora posts, like talking about percentage of equity depending on what series of funding you've raised at the company. Depends on whether you have appetite for an SVP type of level person or a junior person who will grow into it or move on to something else. So just know your numbers and how far you can go.
So I know I'm not on the BD panel, but I am a CEO who's hired a few BD people. It depends on the level. So the way that my head of BD is compensated, half of the bonus is an executive bonus, as you said. His bonus is the same as my bonus as CEO. Not in terms of overall level, but in composition. So we are motivated the same way. He also has equity chunk, just like I do. But he does have objectives. So the other half, though, is in terms of objectives. That a lot of it, in my case, are really top of the funnel oriented. So a lot of my BD right now is oriented around ISVs. So getting complementary partners to integrate with my product and frankly generate lots of low cost leads for my sales team. Later on, we might do some channel partner types of things, and then there'll be other metrics around that. So I've actually have a junior BD person that's just started, and she's really focused on service partners, so she's got different objectives there. So you're right. I think that's the hard about BD is it means so many different things. Is it channel partners? Is it ISV kind of stuff? Is it monster OEM multi-million-dollar deals? Like it really depends on the situation.
Okay, well great. Let's thank the panel, please.